I mean, April Ryan, the president said tonight, and I quote, Paul Manafort is a, quote, good man, and that he feels, quote, sorry from Paul Manafort. Yeah. He has never ruled out possibly pardoning Paul Manafort, which he can do because these are all federal. These are all federal charges. Listen to what he said just last Friday on this question.
I don't talk about that now. I don't talk about that. I think the whole Manafort trial is very sad. When you look at what's going on there, I think it's a very sad day for our country. He worked for me for a very short period of time, but you know what? He happens to be a very good person. And I think it's very sad what they've done to Paul Manafort.
So, April, a presidential pardon, possible, probable, out of the question?
Well, I'm not going to say it's out of the question because what he said, once again, leaving Air Force One, he felt badly for Paul Manafort. That is key right there. Paul Manafort has been, I guess, held the line with the president. He has not done a Michael Cohen, if you will, using Michael Cohen as a verb, what he's done, they're back and forth with him. But Paul Manafort has kept his mouth shut, has not really gone out in the press talking against the president or putting anything out there. So in the president's eyes, he looks good. But according to my Republican sources, as of 2 weeks ago, there was no paper or anything as it relates to a possible pardon of Paul Manafort. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything with this president, because he could wind up, once there's a conviction, turn around and say, hey, you know, we're going to do this, we're going to change things. But you got to remember that this president does not like anything as it relates to this Russia investigation. But what we're forgetting is, when we talk about this tax issue that Paul Manafort has been found guilty on with these 8 counts, that money that he received came from this oligarch who had links to the Kremlin. And that was where he was getting paid these millions of dollars.
That's a very important point in the work he did for Ukraine, was for the Yanukovych regime, which was you know, propped up by the Kremlin and by Putin. It is an important point. Harry, to you. Look, the president, one thing he said tonight that stood out to me that isn't getting the headlines, but it's important. And I quote, he said, this has nothing to do with where they started out, meaning Mueller's team. It was not the original mission, believe me. The thing is, that's just wrong. I mean, when Rosenstein said, Mueller, do this probe, you can do this probe, it can be as broad as you need it to be, and your tentacles can reach where they need to, right? Lead this where it may. And the president's saying that's not the case.
Yeah, and it also, I think even more than that, it did actually touch up against the campaign in ways that became apparent through the evidence. So there was testimony relating to some of the bank fraud issues about a job offer to someone in the administration who helped get a large loan for Manafort.
The Department of Justice in this case actually showed an email that was sent from Paul Manafort to Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, that said, hey, I recommend you hire the head of this bank that, by the way, Manafort's trying to get $60 million in loans from, to be the Secretary of the Army. It never happened, but there was an attempt.
Absolutely, and it was part of the bank fraud. And so this clearly did touch upon the campaign, not as directly as Michael Cohen's statement in court today, but it absolutely grew out of the campaign and also grew out of, as you point out, the investigation that was conducted. And if you come across additional crimes in the course of the investigation, should the prosecutor just bury his head and say, well, sure, we found serious crimes, but because they don't prove collusion or something, we're going to ignore them? No.
30 seconds each. Shan, to you first. What hurt or who hurt the president more today, Michael Cohen or Paul Manafort?
I think Michael Cohen hurt him worse and also poses a far greater continuing danger.
Frank?
I think you can't separate. It's the combined force of the two of them. And once again, we have to kind of reckon with who Donald Trump associates himself with and what kind of behavior he either tolerates or turns a blind eye to.
Like my mother taught me when I was young, you are who your friends are. All right, you are who you associate with.
That's a bad aphorism for Donald Trump.
All right, thank you all, one and all. I appreciate it.